So I went into this book with my expectations on the floor. I'm one of the very, very few lesbians who didn't really care for the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but this book has caused quite a bit of buzz and I have fear of missing out, so here I am. I came back to give Taylor Jenkins Reid another chance, and I have to say this book surprised me in more ways than one. That wink was for women only. Because I love women. The scandal. Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video, we're just going to be discussing the book Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A lot of my audience will already be familiar with Taylor Jenkins Reid from her book, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And Atmosphere is, I believe, Reid's second Sapphic romance novel. And what is it about? Well, set in the summer of 1980, astrophysics professor Joan Goodwin begins training to be an astronaut at Houston's Johnson Space Center, alongside an exceptional group of fellow candidates. As the new astronauts prepare for their first flights, Joan finds a passion and a love she never imagined and begins to question everything she believes about her place in the observable universe. Then in December of 1984, on mission STS-LR9, everything changes in an instant. Nice. Let's get into it. First of all, I appreciated the amount of research that seemingly went into the making of this novel. There were a lot of details and explanations about scientific subjects peppered throughout this book that for a layman such as myself were interesting to read about and made the story feel much more immersive. Reid has said that for Atmosphere, she studied the works of Andy Weir, read about Apollo 13 and pored over NASA documents. She has also shared that she had a lot of help from Paul Dye, a retired NASA flight director who helped her untangle all of the technical details. And I'm aware it might sound as though I'm praising Reid for doing the bare minimum. It should be a given that an author does adequate research for a novel. But one of the reasons I'm highlighting the research aspect of the book is because this level of research is a notable improvement from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, where instead of taking the time to research gay and lesbian history and experience properly, Reid was essentially just freestyling, and honestly, the lack of research that she did for that book was kind of borderline offensive. I have a whole video about that book for those who are interested in the rant. But yeah, so yes, I want to give her credit for taking the time to properly research the relevant subject matters this time around, and for producing a more thoughtful piece of work. Funnily enough, I have seen some reviews of Atmosphere describe the way that the scientific and technical aspects were written as unprofessional and unbelievable, which if you're reading this book having expertise or experience in certain scientific fields may well be the case. I mean, I can certainly see what people mean about Joan coming across as more of an amateur who is reeling off freshly learned astronomy facts as opposed to a seasoned professor or expert. And perhaps it's true that the research Reid did wasn't integrated into characterization or applied to the book in the most authentic way. But like I said, from a layman's perspective, I found the technical and scientific aspects digestible and interesting. And in fairness, Reid did seek out professional input for the book, and I think for the kind of book this is, it's not really that big a deal. The general writing quality and Atmosphere is also an improvement from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. For one, I am pleased to report that at no point in Atmosphere was I appalled by what I was reading on the page. And whilst the writing style in Atmosphere is still somewhat succinct, simplistic, and in places surface level, overall it feels much more thoughtful and mature compared to The Seven Husbands. And again, I have to give Reid credit for growing as an author. I also appreciated how Reid peppered in small details, parallels, and connections throughout the book. For example, Vanessa introducing Joan and Francis to PBJ sandwiches dipped in strawberry milkshake, which they later order in her period of absence to show how she's still with them even when she's not physically there. The conversation about space-themed music between Vanessa and Joan and how that's later used to communicate their feelings in code to one another, and the parallel between Vanessa's father dying during a flight in the Korean War and being hailed as a war hero, and Vanessa nearly dying during a space flight, and becoming a hero of sorts too. Again, these smaller details highlight a thoughtfulness to the book, and I appreciated how Reid trusted the reader to make these connections by themselves. Some authors don't trust the reader to do that, and it can be annoying. So, my only real criticisms writing-wise is that the dialogue between the characters felt somewhat inauthentic and stunted in places. You know, certain interactions and dynamics were perhaps not as thoughtful as I would have liked, and the writing in the last quarter of the book felt a lot more rushed compared to the rest. But I think these criticisms can be chalked up to the simplistic aspect of Reid's writing. You know, whilst I feel that the writing quality in Atmosphere is an improvement on The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, it's still of a certain caliber, and it is what it is. The strongest aspect of the book, in my opinion, perhaps controversially, is the story. Now, a space-themed romance where one half of the couple almost dies on a mission is far from an original concept. Atmosphere is rather obviously a cocktail of inspirations. But in my opinion, the feminist and sapphic elements, some of which carry real-life historical significance, provide some interesting layers and bring a refreshing feel to a familiar concept. And in my opinion, Atmosphere hits all of the beats and has everything a great story should have: suspense, danger, romance, and the underdog rising to the top. It's not as though we have a wealth of space-themed lesbian romances, and the fact that the book wasn't built upon a completely original or unique concept didn't personally diminish the storytelling aspect for me at all. So, moving on to the romance aspect, being honest, the interactions and relationship between Joan and Vanessa felt somewhat stagnant and left a lot to be desired in the first half of the book. I love a good slow burn, but I think Reid dialed their connection and interactions back a little bit too much in the first half. However, in the second half of the book, the romance really picks up. And I have to say, I love the way their relationship unfolded. Parts of it are beautifully written and even had me smiling at the page. Like the simple fool I am. You know, Joan is experiencing true love and attraction for the very first time after feeling disconnected for so long in an oppressive heteronormative society. And I feel that Reid really captured how precious and sacred that is in the book. I also loved how Vanessa saw who Joan truly was, and, you know, how they shared this unspoken knowing between them, because that's something that's very true to life. And I also thought Reid set up an interesting contrast with how Joan and Vanessa's relationship bloomed in secret around the same time that Hank and Donna had a very public engagement and celebration of their love. You know, it portrayed a core difference between the experiences of homosexual and heterosexual couples during that time period, and also highlights what heterosexual couples took for granted. I think overall, Atmosphere dedicates a fair amount of itself to Joan and Vanessa's relationship. It's certainly not crumbs, but personally I didn't feel as though it was as fleshed out or fulfilling as it could have been either, especially for a book which advertises itself as a love story. Funnily enough, I read some reviews where people were complaining that too much of the book was dedicated to the romance. I mean, again, the book is advertised as a love story, so I don't know what they were expecting, but at the same time, I definitely disagree. I mean, I felt in places that Joan and Vanessa's relationship took a backseat to the relationship between Joan and her niece, as well as other aspects of Joan's life. And whilst I don't think that necessarily diminished the romantic aspect of the book, I feel it's more truthful to say that the love story is one aspect of many in Joan's story, as opposed to the book being a love story. I will say that for the most part, not all, but most, Joan felt fairly realistic as a lesbian character, and I appreciate that Reid took care to avoid a lot of the, you know, reductive and lazy tropes that are usually thrust upon lesbian characters in literature. Again, this is yet another area of improvement upon The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Hugo. If I'm going to split hairs, which I quite like to do in my book reviews, I don't think the brief kiss between Joan and Griff was entirely necessary or necessary at all. There were so many other ways that scene could have been written to get the same message across without a kiss. Just let lesbian characters be free of men. That said, even though it irked me slightly, within the context of Joan questioning and discovering her sexuality for the first time in a real-world heteronormative environment, which can be messy and confusing, and the fact that it didn't really take away anything from or interfere with the Sapphic romance, I suppose it can be forgiven. I mean, I don't like it, but it can be forgiven. The aspects of Joan's lesbian characterization I thought were questionable is that firstly, she has her gay awakening at a strip club in her 30s. I found it hard to believe that there were absolutely no stirrings or indications that she might be attracted to women before that moment. I mean, before the strip club, her sexuality was written as almost this non-entity. And I know sexuality is a very personal thing. Everybody has their own individual journey with it. And my experience is not every single other lesbian's experience. I'm sure people are going to have something to say about this in the comments. But I grew up not knowing anything about lesbianism whatsoever. And I still definitely had stirrings from a very, very young age, even if at the time I didn't understand them or later on want to accept them. So going to a strip club in your 30s, seeing a naked woman and a light bulb suddenly going off, I don't know that's how it works. But okay. Secondly, I have to say, I thought Joan wanting to be the stripper aligned with a more heterosexual or bisexual female mindset rather than a lesbian one. I think the whole you want to be her concept is something a lot of straight women project onto lesbians. I mean, I've literally had a straight woman tell me I'm not attracted to women, I just want to be them in real life. So maybe that's why it rubbed me the wrong way. But yeah, I think some of this can just be traced back to the fact that Reid is not a lesbian and there are just certain things she doesn't know or understand. And thirdly, I thought it was highly questionable that Joan brushed off the comment from spicy misogynist Jimmy, where he was hinting that he knew the truth about her and Vanessa, considering that their hopes, dreams, jobs, and reputations were at risk if they were suspected or discovered to be a couple. Now, the fact that Joan didn't take this comment as seriously as she should have is addressed in the book, but the explanation given felt weak and unrealistic, and it just painted Joan as overly naive. It just didn't really make sense given that she, you know, is an intelligent woman. I mean, it's just a small thing, but it bothered me a little bit. Another prominent aspect of Atmosphere is it explores the sexism female astronauts were up against in the 1970s and 80s, and it portrays different approaches to and navigations of sexism within a male-dominated environment through its female characters. For example, Joan is incredibly bothered by the disrespect and wants to take a stand against it so that the behaviour isn't normalised. But Lydia, on the other hand, joins in and partakes in the misogynist quote-unquote banter in order to play the game and survive in a male-dominated environment by mirroring male behaviour. And I think the explanations for these different approaches to dealing with misogyny in the book were interesting and thoughtful. I also loved the discussion the characters have about Sally Ride in the novel, and the acknowledgement of not only the greatness of her achievements as an astronaut, but of the amount of extra pressure she was under as a woman. Because as the first American female to make the journey into space, she was not only representing herself, but her entire sex. And Atmosphere offers a profound reminder of what her achievements represent. The only aspect of the book's exploration of sexism that I didn't really appreciate is how Reid, through Joan's musings, suggested that the overarching reason that men behave in a sexist way towards women is that they're terrified of seeming weak, and they have been taught to associate kindness with weakness. Because to me, that is a very milquetoast and oversimplified, or perhaps irreflective is a better word, take, when in reality male resentment and disrespect of women runs much deeper than that. To be fair, I didn't pick up this book for its galaxy brain feminist takes. It just gives me the ick when the discussion of men's sexist behaviour towards women is infused with an air of sympathy. Men don't shit on women because they're terrified, they shit on women as a power play and to feel better about themselves. Come on now. Other than that, the only remaining criticisms I have for the book is I think the way that Reid writes female characters, I mean characters in general, but the book kind of focuses on female characters, leaves a lot to be desired. It's fair to say that Joan was fully realised and felt like a complete person, but the other female characters very much came across as two-dimensional or like cliches rather than actual fleshed out human beings. For example, there was not too much more to Donna than being, you know, the signature nice girl who also served as a vehicle to make brief commentary on women having to make a choice between careers and motherhood. Barbara felt like a one-note caricature of a high school mean girl, and whilst there was an attempt made to flesh Lydia out beyond just a smug antagonist and create layers of vulnerability and complexity for her, it felt incredibly half-baked. And within the context of the book being about some of the early female astronauts at NASA, Reid had a great opportunity to create a range of incredibly interesting and complex female characters. And outside of Joan, maybe Vanessa as well, she just didn't take it. In truth, women are so much more fascinating and layered than Reid writes them, and it's frustrating that I'm always left wanting more from her work. But again, I think all of this just loops back to her simplistic writing style, and you know, it is what it is. Now, as for the ending, I liked it a lot. There's so many reviews where people have said they cried their eyes out at the ending of this book. And whilst I didn't cry, it did make me emotional. It's not so much that Vanessa was possibly going to die. It's the way that Joan and Vanessa were trying to communicate how much they meant to each other in code in such an intense moment because they couldn't be open about who they truly were. That got me good. I also appreciated how the last dialogue exchange between Joan and Vanessa, the hi and hi, not only connects back to their first exchange of dialogue upon first meeting, but also to when they would meet up in secret after pretending to go their separate ways in public. The highs very much signify their coming back together, and I thought that was a really neat detail and a beautiful way to end the novel. Overall, I can say that I enjoyed Atmosphere, and honestly, I would recommend it. Just with the caveat that your expectations are adjusted accordingly, in line with Reid's signature writing style. It's not a Donna Tartt novel. I think I'd give this book a 3.5 stars out of 5. That said, I don't think I will be reading any more novels from Taylor Jenkins Reid, because even though I enjoyed this and I can see that she's grown as an author, her writing is ultimately still too surface level and simplistic for my own personal tastes. I mean, I have nothing against her. I bought this book. I'm glad that she's getting her bag, but this book is confirmation that I just really don't vibe with her work. Okay guys, if you've read Atmosphere, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.